For this painting demonstration, instead of just doing a sped up video, I thought I'd actually explain some of the process and the creative decision making that went on while I was painting this. I shortened this even faster and uploaded it as a reel on Instagram and a TikTok. I got a lot of interest and questions on why I was doing certain things in the painting. So in this demo, it's still sped up. This is about an hour and a half of painting, not counting drying time. And I've got it shortened down to about 11 minutes here on YouTube. But it gives me time to talk about it and let you know why I was doing some of these things. So I hope you enjoy or learned something. Anyway, thanks. I'm starting with a pre-stretched gessoed canvas, and I'm just going to add a little color to it. And I'm using a brayer because it starts adding texture right from the beginning. You can see some of the lines in there, and switching to this brayer softened up some of the texture. And again, my background was going to be sky, so I leaned heavily on cobalt blue and titanium white in the background here. I have really been playing with adding a lot more sculptural type texture elements in my paintings. So this is a piece of vegetable netting, onion netting, something like that. And I'm using some heavy body gel medium to hold it in. And after I let that dry, add a little bit more color on top to kind of fix what I put in there. And little dot sponge, again, just a little more texture. I decided I wanted a color more than just cobalt blue and white. So I added a light viridian. And again, this is some paper, sort of a texture type fibrous paper. I ended up kind of losing this with some of the other texture I added on top. But still, it helps build those layers. This is one of my favorite techniques, is taking corrugated cardboard, and I find that the Starbucks cup warmers are perfect for this. Add some paint, add some lines. You can add paint onto it and create lines, or you can dip it in and kind of create negative lines and paint that's already there. Tape is going down for the wire that the birds are sitting on. This painting is a study for a larger painting. So part of this, I'm trying out different techniques and see how I like it. So I was testing one way of getting a sharp line for the wire in there. Okay, so I'll add more color on top. And again, this is all building layers, evening out the color. I'm using a different roller this time. I kind of like that puckery look that the foam roller gives. And you see me spraying water on that, because that foam roller, I should have probably gotten it wet ahead of time, but I didn't want to leave when I was working on it. So I just sprayed it with water, kept rolling, and kept adding it in. And it softened some of those lines and marks that I put in behind it. And I like that because it shows through. And that's one thing that the rollers help do. It helps some of these things show through that you're doing, and just gives that depth to the painting of many, many layers, things going on behind. This was a little bit of a metallic blue I added in there. Now I'm going to block out the birds. The netting added a little too much texture, so I'm putting a rough outline of where the birds are going to sit. And then where they're sitting on top of that netting, I am actually going to fill it in with some modeling paste, using a knife to apply it and kind of smooth it out the best I can, so that when I'm painting, I'm not caught, the brush and the paint isn't caught up in that netting. So this was something I learned, being that this is a study on my larger painting. I'm going to be more careful about that and maybe apply texture a different way. I'm not sure, but again, that's why I love doing some of these smaller paintings as studies for larger paintings. I kind of can deal with some of these problems ahead of time. And I didn't want that modeling paste sitting right there in one spot, so I spread it around on the canvas. I did let that completely dry and then come in and add some more color on top. And I'm using a pink down below to lighten up as it, lower down on the horizon line. Add a little bit more visual interest. And sometimes I just use a paintbrush to spread things around. It doesn't always have to be rollers and weird things. I lost some of those lines, so put a little bit more back in with cobalt blue. And just kind of spot add some of the cobalt blue in there. I wanted some metallic in here, so I grabbed a piece of string and dipped it in a metallic silver, and then did some flicks around it. So it's a little bit of shiny metallic in the background, but very, very thin, random spots. So now I'm ready to start in on the birds. So I'll draw them out where they're going to be. And I've learned a little trick where you use water and it kind of blocks it out, so you see a little bit more clearly where it is. If you're drawing something larger or more detailed, you can use that with some of the toning. But with this, I just needed a spot of where it's going to be. And then I'm using a clear acrylic gel to hold that in so I don't lose it when I start painting. And so after that completely dries, it's time to start painting the birds. This is chromium oxide green that I'm using to block in the rough shapes. And I use that drawing that I sealed up down below to help locate where these shapes are going to be. Now I'm going in on top with cadmium yellow. The yellow helps not only with the color of the feathers, but put in some highlights in the bird. And I'm going back between the green and the yellow just to kind of block it out. Mars black for their little heads and feathers and tails. And I paint, as you can tell, loosely with the brush. I let the brush strokes indicate feathers and texture. It's all very loose. I don't get in really tight and start painting one feather at a time. I just like to do the indication of feathers and texture with loose brush strokes. And again, you can see I paint right over the tape. That'll come up in just a little bit. And as you paint, you lose some of the highlights and stuff. So I continuously go back and forth, adding layers the same way I do in the background. I do that with the birds. And you can even see the brush that I choose. It's a flat brush. It's kind of rough, and I like that. That helps me give texture. It's small. This painting is only 6 by 12. So the brush is small just so because I'm painting a small space here. I go in and add a little bit of yellow around the painting so it's not just on the bird and that's it. So it comes the tape. It was a little tough because I put a lot of texture around it. And one thing I discovered with this, with it going over that netting was very thick. And then the modeling paste I had to put there so I could do the birds, it made almost kind of a trench in there, which was not easy to paint over. So there was, again, lesson learned with this painting. And I'm using the Mars black and the cad yellow for the wire, shadow on the bottom, highlight on top, and using the same colors throughout the painting, the yellow on the bird, the yellow on the wire, adding a little on the background, helps create some of that unity all over the painting. And this was the same silver that I used for those spots in the sky. I wanted just a little bit of a metallic look to the wire. Okay, and the same with the birds. I felt they were a little dark and they sort of stuck out by themselves. They weren't integrating into the background very well. So I used a little bit of that light viridian, which I used in the background on the birds, both lighten them up and integrate them into the painting a little bit better. So I used that same sort of push-pull, put down the paint, add the highlights, go back and forth. You know, it covered up some of the darks, went back on top of that. It's just like the background. You just keep building layers. And when I lose pieces of texture, highlights, I just add them back in on top. When I'm totally done with the bodies, that's when I do the faces. I didn't need anything very detailed, just a little bit of highlight on the beaks and around the eyes, just to give an impression or indication where those faces were. Now is when I pick up pastel pencils and colored pencils to add some lines and more mark making in here. I used a yellow pastel pencil on top of the wire. It adds a little bit rougher look than the paint on the paintbrush does. And as usual, I'm obsessed with lines, so I started adding lines in the background, a little bit of rough scumbling around that netting. Again, this is a pastel pencil that I'm using, so it has that chalky look to it. And decided I wanted to add pink. This shows up in a lot of my paintings. I like it with cobalt blue. It's a good combination. It's a tropical look. So I'm first used a pastel pencil, then switched over to a colored pencil to get a little bit more detailed. And adding a little bit more of that yellow in the background, that like it's on the birds as well. Now their little feet perched on the wire. Again, this was kind of hard to paint because of the texture from the netting, but it wasn't really detailed, so it didn't need a lot of careful painting, just something to keep their little selves perched on here. So at this point, I thought the painting might be done. I put it up on my easel and stared at it a bit. It just felt like it needed something. So I started adding some more blue and color up here in the corner and in the sky. Adding some cobalt blue with paint. Started adding some with lines as well. Added a little of the green. And some of the yellow. I just could not figure out what was missing up here. So I kept adding different things. Adding the colors in the painting. Started using a sponge to add a little bit more texture because I felt like I was muddying it up. In between each time that I would do something, I would take it, set it over on the easel, look at it a bit, see if that's what it was, put it back, decided maybe it needed to try a little bit of pink, add some more lines in here. Put it over on the easel, decided to put some more lines in. So I came back and added pink around, did some more lines all the way down. And in the end, I decided I was wrong. It didn't need any of that. So I was just making mud up there continuously. More lines, all of that. I just was not happy with it. And the back and forth between the easel and the table where I was painting, I went back and forth probably a dozen times. So even with all the mark making and texture, as you can still see me doing it, and at no point was I happy with any of this. I just kept adding more and more, and it wasn't working. So what I did was I got it wet and scrubbed it off. Used a stiff scrubby brush and some water. And all this was fresh enough. This happened over about the course of maybe 30 minutes that I was going back and forth, back and forth. And I just took it off and decided I liked it better without. And one little trick I use is I'll take a photograph of the painting and go back and forth, and see what was missing. So I decided with dark was not it. I'm just going to go light. So took some of that pink from below, added it up top with a little bit of texture. Didn't take much, and that's what it needed. So now I am sealing in all the pencil and colored pencil and pastel with clear acrylic matte gel. And then I'll let it completely dry, and you have the finished painting. And you can buy this or a print of it at my website, and the links are below. Thank you for watching.